He closed the deal with a wide grin. Ethan Carter, a confident CEO of a major logistics corporation based in Seattle, leaned back in his chair, satisfaction glowing in his eyes. Just then, a quiet voice interrupted his victory lap. "Excuse me, sir, but this contract is a forgery." He turned to see a young girl, maybe 8 years old, with oversized brown eyes and a serious expression. She pointed at the page in front of him. For a second, Ethan almost laughed, but something in her tone made him pause. That was the moment everything began to unravel. Ethan Carter, 36, had built his career on precision, control, and instinct. He didn't trust easily and rarely second-guessed his decisions. But now someone had shifted his perspective. A janitor's daughter, of all people. That evening, Ethan arrived home later than usual. The day had been brutal, back-to-back meetings, tense negotiations, a flood of calls. He tossed his blazer over a chair and rubbed his face wearily. The soft hum of jazz drifted from the kitchen, where his wife Madison greeted him with her usual poised smile, a glass of red wine in hand. "How was your day, honey?" Her voice was gentle, but he sensed an edge beneath it. "I'm exhausted. Just want some food and quiet." He kissed her cheek, masking his irritation. "I made your favorite grilled steak medium rare," she said with a sparkle in her eyes. They sat down at the table. The aroma was perfect. The silverware clinked softly against the plates in an otherwise wordless meal. Ethan broke the silence. "And how was your day?" Madison's expression turned thoughtful. She sipped her wine slowly before speaking. "I had lunch with Angela from the board. She told me something interesting." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Oh, your partner, Gerald Whitmore? He's trying to land that contract with Marcus Langston too." Ethan paused. That name, Langston, was key to their expansion plans. If Gerald went behind his back, Madison leaned forward. "Just sign the damn contract, Ethan. Then we can finally take that trip. You said we deserved a break, didn't you?" Ethan sighed and rubbed his temple. "I just need to verify everything. It's a big step." "You always do this," she snapped. "Always so cautious. Sometimes you just have to act." He set down his fork and met her eyes. "This isn't just a contract. It's the company. My name, my responsibility. If something goes wrong," she rolled her eyes, "you act like the entire world rests on your shoulders." "It does," he said simply. The silence returned, heavier now. Madison was the first to break it. "I'm tired of waiting, Ethan. I want the life we deserve." "I'm too tired for this," he muttered, standing up. He kissed her cheek again, this time coldly, and left for his office upstairs. The dim light of the desk lamp cast warm shadows across the leather-bound folder in front of him. Ethan opened it slowly. Langston's contract gleamed with promise, immense profit, strategic partnerships, market influence. Too perfect. He reached for his glasses and began to read line by line. The room fell quiet except for the soft rustle of pages and the distant ticking of a wall clock. After 15 minutes, Ethan leaned back and exhaled. "Damn it!" There was a knock. "Can I come in?" Madison's voice purred from the other side. "Yeah." She walked in, wine glass in hand, and took the chair across from him. "Well, just like I said, right?" She smiled. Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose. "Everything seems too smooth, too clean." "God, Ethan," she huffed. "Do you always have to see the worst in things? It's a golden opportunity." "I won't sign it until I'm sure," he said calmly. "You're infuriating," Madison growled. "Is it fun, dragging this out? Watching me squirm? Give me time. This isn't a game." She stood up abruptly. "Fine. Do whatever you want." The door slammed behind her. Ethan stared after her for a long moment, then turned back to the contract. Something was wrong. He just didn't know what. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the office earlier than usual. The air in his private floor was still, tinted with that antiseptic scent of freshly cleaned spaces. He walked into his corner office, mug of coffee in hand, and stopped short. A woman was standing near the shelves, gently wiping down the polished wood panels. You're done with the cleaning already? He asked, more surprised than annoyed. The woman, tall, with tired eyes and a calm, almost invisible presence, turned to face him. She wore the blue-gray uniform of their janitorial staff. He vaguely remembered seeing her in the halls. Almost finished, she said quietly. There was something about her. A quiet dignity, maybe. A weight in the way she stood. He nodded, dismissing the thought, and turned to his desk. She gathered her supplies and quietly exited the office, but her gaze lingered on the stack of papers on his desk, the contract from Langston. Later that day, as Ethan finally sat down to review the updated version of the documents, he heard a soft knock. He looked up, the little girl again. Big brown eyes, braids, backpack slightly oversized for her small frame. "Hi, mister. I'm sorry, but I think that paper has a mistake." Ethan blinked. "What do you mean?" She pointed with a tiny finger to a section in the contract. "My mom found it when she was cleaning here. She used to be a lawyer." He stiffened, leaned forward. His eyes narrowed on the line the girl indicated. It was subtle, a misworded clause, legal phrasing off just enough to shift liability. Most wouldn't catch it, but now that she mentioned it, it did look wrong. "Can you take me to your mom?" "She's in the archives room." Ethan shot up, contract in hand. His heartbeat quickened. He walked quickly down the hall, pushed open the door to the records room. She was there, the same woman from earlier, now sorting through a row of file boxes. She turned at the sound of the door, her expression unreadable. "Miss?" She straightened. "Victoria Monroe." "Victoria," he repeated. "You found an error in the Langston contract?" "I noticed a discrepancy," she said calmly, eyes steady. "This clause, it shouldn't be there, and the signature on page 4 doesn't match yours." Ethan flipped to the page. She was right. The signature looked like his, but just barely. It was a forgery. Clean one. Almost perfect. "Where did this come from?" he whispered. "I don't know, but someone tampered with the document. You were about to sign something very dangerous." He felt cold all over. He looked at her again. Not just a cleaning woman anymore. There was sharpness in her tone, control in her posture. She wasn't guessing, she knew. "You said you used to be a lawyer?" Victoria nodded slowly. "I had to disappear," she said quietly. "Years ago, I uncovered a corruption scheme tied to a major corporation. They came after me. I lost everything, my job, my name. I had a daughter to protect." He stepped back, the weight of it settling in. "Why didn't you tell someone sooner?" "I didn't know if I could trust you, or if you'd already been compromised." Her honesty hit him harder than any accusation. "What do I do now?" Victoria looked around, cautious. "Whoever forged that contract wanted you to take the fall. You need to find out who. And fast." Ethan stared down at the papers again. The deal he was so eager to sign just 24 hours ago was a trap. Carefully laid, expertly crafted, and meant to destroy him. And the only person who had warned him was someone nobody noticed. Not until now. Ethan sat alone in his office, the blinds drawn halfway against the late afternoon sun. The silence was suffocating. In his hands, the Langston contract, now officially a red flag. He had checked it, page by page, signature by signature. Victoria Monroe was right, and if she hadn't spoken up, he would have signed it. The worst part? Someone close had to be behind it. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, thinking. Gerald Whitmore? His right hand? No, couldn't be. But lately Gerald had been distant. Or maybe Langston himself. The contract was clean on the surface. Slick. Too slick. Then there was Madison. His wife had been pushing him hard to close the deal. Insisting. Whispering about power and influence. About how they deserved more. Her impatience, her cold detachment when he hesitated. It all came back like shards of glass. That evening, the house felt too quiet. Madison was already home, lounging on their cream-colored sofa, scrolling her phone. She looked up, smiled. "You look like hell." "I feel like it," he muttered, hanging up his coat. "Did you sign it?" she asked immediately. He paused, just a beat too long. "No." She sighed, exaggerated. Ethan, we talked about this. No, you talked. I listened. He walked into the kitchen, poured himself a drink. She followed him. You're being paranoid again. And you're pushing too hard. What are you trying to say? Her voice sharpened. He turned to face her, his expression colder than she'd ever seen. Did you know that contract was forged? Her lips parted slightly, no words. Then she looked away. What difference does it make? Everyone stands to gain. So what if a few lines were edited? You mean forged? You're acting like this is some conspiracy thriller. She snapped. It's business. People manipulate contracts all the time. Ethan stepped closer. Tell me the truth. Did you know? Madison crossed her arms. I told you. I want more than this middle-tier life, Ethan. I want power. And you? You just sit in your office, second-guessing every opportunity that comes your way. He stared at her for a long, cold moment. And what about Marcus Langston? You said he was just a business contact. I never said just, she said with a smile that chilled him to the bone. He felt something crack inside. You and Langston, he said slowly. Was this your plan all along? Madison didn't answer, but the silence was deafening. The next morning, Ethan sat in his car outside the office, unable to move. The betrayal had settled in like frost. He had married her out of admiration, desire, and once love. But now he realized she had always wanted more. More than him, more than what he could give. And someone had offered her exactly that. Inside the building, the day ticked on like any other. But Ethan moved like a man waking from anesthesia. Every smile seemed fake. Every handshake rehearsed. He stepped into his office and sat in his chair, eyes blank. Victoria appeared in the doorway a few minutes later. You okay? She asked. No. He didn't need to pretend with her. Not anymore. She walked in and handed him a folder. Background on Langston. And something else, this envelope was left at the front desk for you. No return name. Ethan opened it. Inside, copies of texts, photos, surveillance stills. Madison, Langston, meetings in cafes, close, intimate, smiling. His breath caught in his throat. Victoria lowered her eyes. I didn't want to be the one to show you this, but you needed to know. Ethan leaned forward, buried his face in his hands. I trusted her, he whispered. I know. She used me. I know that too. They sat in silence for a while. No papers rustling. No ringing phones. Just the sound of a man watching his world fracture. And a woman who had learned long ago how to survive in ruins. The day Ethan Carter signed the forged contract, he thought he was closing a chapter. In truth, it was just the beginning of the unraveling. It had all happened fast. The moment of hesitation vanished under Madison's persistent gaze. She poured him a drink, kissed his cheek, whispered something sweet, and he signed. Just like that. Marcus Langston had smiled when they shook hands later that afternoon, the ink barely dry, his gray suit pristine, gold cufflinks gleaming. To a new future, Ethan, he said smoothly, lifting his glass. Ethan forced a smile. Inside, his stomach twisted. Hours later, back in his office, Ethan sat alone. He pulled the signed document from his briefcase and stared at it. His chest felt tight. He opened the folder again. Something was wrong. Victoria's voice echoed in his memory. Check page 4 again. He turned to it. There it was, a legal clause he didn't remember agreeing to. The numbers didn't add up. The phrasing was inconsistent. It was the same document Victoria had warned him about, just with a fresh signature. His signature. He cursed under his breath and grabbed his phone. He scrolled past Madison's contact, past Gerald's. He stopped at one name, Detective Daniel Vaughn. They hadn't spoken in years, but Vaughn had helped Ethan once before. A private investigator with a badge, sharp instincts, and no patience for corruption. Ethan hit dial. Vaughn, came the familiar raspy voice. It's Ethan Carter. I need your help. It's serious. A beat of silence. Then, tell me where to meet. Later that evening, They met in a quiet diner off I-5. The kind of place where nobody asked questions and the waitress already knew Vaughn's usual. Ethan slid the folder across the table. Vaughn opened it, skimmed the pages. Forgery, hidden clauses, and a co-signed agreement with Langston's Shell Corporation, he muttered. You got played. I want to know who's behind this. I want to know everything. Vaughn leaned back, tapping the side of the folder. This isn't just Langston. This kind of scheme needs layers. Lawyers, bankers, insiders. You've got to leak Ethan. Someone feeding them information from the inside. Ethan's jaw clenched. Find them. Vaughn nodded. It'll cost. Whatever it takes. Vaughn stood. I'll call you in 48 hours. Don't trust anyone. Especially not the ones closest. Back at the office the next morning, Ethan passed through the halls like a ghost. Everyone greeted him like usual, but he couldn't shake the feeling that eyes lingered a little longer, that smiles were a bit too sharp. In the break room, he saw Victoria Monroe grabbing a coffee. She turned, her expression cautious. I heard about the signing. It's bad, he admitted. I figured. I called a friend, Detective Vaughn. He's looking into it. She nodded. Good. You're going to need someone ruthless. I also need someone who knows how to read legal footprints. Help me dig through the company's paperwork. Contracts, memos, emails. I don't care if it takes all night. Victoria raised her eyebrows. You want me to come back in as a lawyer? Wasn't that what you always were? She gave a slow, reluctant smile. I'll need access. Files, systems, maybe a team. You'll have it. She looked down at her coffee, then back at him. Then let's go catch some snakes. That night, as the office lights dimmed, Ethan and Victoria began their descent into the data. Every server folder, every offshore transaction, every redacted memo. They opened them all. And soon, a name appeared. Nathaniel Reyes, CFO. Trusted, quiet, brilliant. And he had co-signed a document with a shell company registered to Langston Global Holdings, 2 months before the forged contract ever arrived. Ethan's blood went cold. He's the leak, Victoria whispered. And he's not working alone. The walls were closing in. But now, finally, they had somewhere to start digging. By the time Friday rolled around, Ethan Carter hadn't slept more than a few hours in days. The office was dim, quiet. Most of the staff had gone home, eager to start their weekend. But Ethan, Victoria, and Detective Vaughn were buried in documents, cross-referencing files and following trails through offshore banking networks and shell company registrations. Nathaniel Reyes, the CFO, he had been with the company for nearly a decade. Quiet, methodical, the kind of man you never questioned because he never gave you a reason to. And yet, there it was, a financial paper trail leading from Reyes to Langston's people, months before the contract even existed. He used your company as a pass-through, Vaughn explained, laying out printouts. Fake supply deals, inflated invoices, classic laundering scheme. And now, with your signature on that fake contract, they could move real money under your name. They planned it all, Ethan muttered. Months in advance. Victoria sat back, rubbing her temples. They were waiting for the right moment. You hesitated, and Madison pushed you. Ethan looked down, anger flaring in his chest. Not just at her, at himself, for not seeing it sooner. Later that night, Ethan returned home. Madison was in the living room, wearing silk pajamas, sipping wine and watching a late-night drama. She looked up when he entered but said nothing. He sat across from her. You knew Reyes was involved? Her eyes didn't flinch. You're still on this? He's been moving money, using my company, with Langston's help. She sipped her wine, unbothered. Ethan, you can rant and spiral, or you can realize this was always the game. Big players, big moves. You're the one who chose to hesitate. His voice was quiet. You betrayed me. Don't be dramatic. You still have everything. The business. Your reputation for now. But if you don't play smart, you'll lose it all. He stood. You already lost me. She smiled coldly. I never had you. Ethan left before sunrise. He drove aimlessly through downtown Seattle, the streets empty and glowing under amber streetlights. By the time the sun began to rise over the Sound, he pulled up to Victoria's apartment. She opened the door in sweats and a hoodie, surprised to see him. "You okay?" she asked. "No," he said truthfully. "I think I've lost everything that ever mattered to me. Except getting justice." Victoria nodded and stepped aside, letting him in. "I've been up too," she said. "I found something new." She laid out a printout on the table. An email chain between Reyes and someone only signed as AS. The emails were cryptic, but they mentioned moving the files to storage, watching the lawyer, and most chillingly, "Carter won't know until it's too late." Ethan stared at the initials. AS. Victoria's face was pale. She looked up slowly. "I think I know who that is." They dug into old contacts, company archives, and security reports. By the next morning, it was clear. Alexander Shaw, a name Ethan hadn't heard in years. A former business partner. Brilliant, volatile, and fired for misusing company funds. Everyone thought he had disappeared. But he hadn't. Shaw was the ghost behind the curtain. The one who had been orchestrating the entire scheme with Langston and Reyes. His revenge years in the making. Victoria leaned over the table. "This isn't just fraud, Ethan. This is a takedown." Ethan stood, fists clenched. "Then we stopped playing defense." That afternoon, Vaughn arranged a sting. They had enough to confront Reyes, not to arrest him yet, but to shake him. Ethan met him in the boardroom, alone. Reyes entered with his usual air of indifference. "I heard you've been looking into me," he said flatly. "I know what you did. I'm afraid I don't follow. You sold me out, worked with Langston, took money through shell companies. You even left a trail." Reyes gave a long sigh. "You were always too soft. That's why I never told you. You don't have what it takes to be in the real game." Ethan stepped closer. "And that's why you're going to fall." Reyes' smirk faltered. "Your name is on everything," he said, a last bluff. "You'll take the fall, not me. Not when I hand over the evidence. And not when I've got people like Vaughn and Monroe," Ethan added. The mention of Victoria's name made Reyes flinch. "You have no idea what kind of mess you're in," Reyes said finally, turning toward the door. "I think I do," Ethan called after him. "And I'm not done yet." The next day felt strangely calm. The sky was clear. The morning news droned on about rising gas prices and a new tech IPO. But Ethan Carter knew that beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. He arrived at the office early, determined to finish what he and Victoria had started. Vaughn had gone dark. He was coordinating the next move against Alexander Shaw, working quietly with federal agents to prepare an airtight case. Ethan had provided every scrap of data they had uncovered. Now it was a waiting game. He sat in his office, rereading old reports, when he heard a tiny knock. Turning, he saw her, the little girl again, Victoria's daughter. She stood in the doorway, a bit shy, hugging her backpack. "Mr. Carter?" she asked. He smiled, setting down his tablet. "Hi there. What brings you here?" I think the new papers are wrong too." Ethan's smile faded. "What papers?" She stepped forward, pulled a folded page from her bag. "My mom said it looked weird when she was cleaning your desk last night. She told me not to touch it, but I remembered what happened last time, so I looked. And..." She handed it to him. Ethan unfolded the page, heart already pounding. The contract looked like a recent draft. Updated terms, same company names. But the signature block wasn't his. He narrowed his eyes. The signature was forged. Again. But this time, the clause beneath it wasn't just suspicious, it was dangerous. A liability release. One that would absolve Alexander Shaw and his affiliates from all legal action. It was practically a confession hidden in legalese. Ethan stood up so fast his chair rolled back into the wall. "Where's your mom?" "In the records room," she answered, eyes wide. He rushed down the hall, heart pounding. Victoria was there, bent over a set of boxes, sorting through old invoices. She looked up, startled. "Victoria," he said, breathless. "Your daughter." She found this. He held out the paper. She took one look and turned pale. They tried again. He nodded. And this time they got sloppy. She traced the forged signature with her finger. They're rushing. That means they know we're closing in. Ethan exhaled slowly, pulse still racing. We need to find Shaw. Now. Hours later, Victoria received an anonymous call on her personal number. A man's voice, low and threatening. You're digging too deep, Miss Monroe. She froze. I'd suggest you stop before someone gets hurt. We know about your daughter. Click. The line went dead. Her hands trembled. She backed away from the wall and leaned on the filing cabinet to steady herself. Moments later, Ethan found her standing there, pale and silent. Victoria. She looked up at him, voice barely above a whisper. They know about my daughter. They threatened her. His stomach dropped. That was it. Enough. They called Vaughn. He didn't hesitate. I'll take the girl, he said. I have a place. Secure. No one gets in or out without my say. Victoria hesitated. She's never been away from me. She'll be safe. And we can't risk it. An hour later, Vaughn arrived in a nondescript car. He bent down to Irina's level. You like dogs? She nodded. I've got two. They're good listeners. And they don't bark much. You think you can help me take care of them for a few days? She nodded again and turned to hug her mother tightly. I'll be back soon. Okay? Victoria swallowed her tears. I know, sweetheart. She watched them drive away, heartbreaking, but knowing it was the right thing. That night, Ethan sat beside her on the couch in her apartment. She stared at the window, arms folded tightly. They threatened a child, he said. They've done worse, she replied. I'm not letting them win. She turned to look at him. Then we don't stop. We push back. Ethan nodded. And as thunder rumbled over the sound and the storm finally broke over Seattle, they both knew. The final confrontation was near. Summer arrived in Seattle suddenly, bringing dry heat and the illusion of peace. But inside Ethan Carter's world, tension had never been higher. The public still knew nothing, but behind the scenes, a silent war was reaching its peak. Detective Vaughn was still off-grid, keeping Irina safe. Victoria Monroe stayed at Ethan's side constantly. She worked late into the night, her focus razor-sharp, never once asking for rest. And Ethan, caught between rage and responsibility, pushed forward like a man with nothing left to lose. He knew now. Alexander Shaw wasn't just an old rival. He was the architect behind it all. Every forged document, every threat, every planted signature. Madison, Reyes, Langston all had been his pawns. One night, Victoria found something. A financial report buried in old email backups. Transactions linked to a company in Montana, Westrock Holdings, traced to an IP address registered to Shaw. He's still operating from inside the country, she said. And he's gotten sloppy. Sloppy means afraid, Ethan replied. They sent the information to Vaughn, who immediately dispatched a small surveillance team to the address. Within 24 hours, they had photographic proof. Alexander Shaw was staying in a private estate in Missoula, using a false name, guarded by 3 men on payroll. They're armed. You'll need a warrant and a damn good reason to go in, Vaughn said over the phone. We don't have time for red tape. Then we make our own door, Ethan said. Victoria didn't like the plan. You want to go to Montana? Yourself. He's slipping. This is the only window we'll get. What if it's a trap? Then I walk into it with my eyes open. They argued. But in the end, she agreed to go with him. Not because she believed it was safe, but because she refused to let him go alone. The flight to Missoula was quiet. They barely spoke. Ethan was locked in thought. Victoria watched him, the man who, just months ago, seemed so detached, so cold. Now he looked like someone who had been torn open and rebuilt. He had fire in his eyes, purpose. At the rental car desk, she broke the silence. You've changed. He looked at her. You did that. She smiled faintly. No. You decided to stop pretending. They arrived at the estate just before dusk. Vaughn's team was already in place, stationed in the woods surrounding the property. It was risky, unofficial, and deeply illegal. But there was no time for law. At 8:42 p.m., the signal came. 2 operatives cut the power. Ethan and Victoria moved quietly through the trees, Vaughn close behind. No shouting, no alarms, just the steady sound of boots over dry earth. Inside, Shaw was alone in his study, backlit by a candle. He didn't look surprised when Ethan appeared in the doorway. "Took you long enough," he said calmly, setting down his glass. "Don't bother running," Ethan said. "It's over." Shaw stood, older now, thinner, but his voice still carried the same venom it had years ago. "You really think exposing me fixes your world, Ethan?" "No, but it stops you from poisoning anyone else's. Everything I did better than you. I built smarter, I moved faster, and still, you're the one who got to play hero." "You destroyed lives," Ethan said. Shaw smirked. "So did you. You just had better PR." He moved suddenly toward a drawer. Vaughn stepped in behind Ethan and shouted, "Hands up! Step back!" Shaw paused. Then slowly he raised his hands. "I guess this is the part where you win." Ethan walked forward. "No, Alex. This is the part where you disappear." Shaw was taken into custody that night. No press. No headlines. Not yet. But for Ethan and Victoria, it was the first breath of clean air in months. Back at the hotel, she finally let herself collapse on the bed. He joined her, both too tired to speak. After a long silence, she turned to him. "Do you think we're finally free?" Ethan looked at her, his voice quiet. "I think we just earned the right to be." Seattle was wet again when they returned. The sky had lost its summer sheen and traded it for gray clouds and the smell of rain-soaked pavement. But something was different now. Ethan Carter walked into his office like a man who had just been pulled from the wreckage and was still standing. Alexander Shaw was in federal custody. Reyes was under investigation. Langston had fled the country, and Madison, well, she hadn't returned home. Her lawyer had sent papers requesting a divorce and half of Ethan's assets, citing emotional duress. The irony didn't even sting anymore. Victoria Monroe sat in the conference room, reviewing legal files. She didn't need a desk anymore. Her presence in the company was understood. Not as a janitor, not even as just a lawyer, as a partner. Detective Vaughn returned to the office 2 days later, a bandage on his arm and a smirk on his face. "Shaw's singing like a canary," he said, tossing a file onto Ethan's desk. "Turns out your ex-wife and Langston were part of a much bigger circle. Offshore accounts, fake donors, even political payoffs." Ethan leaned forward, flipping through the pages. "Jesus. Yeah, we're going to need another conference room." Victoria walked in mid-conversation. "I just got confirmation. The Department of Justice is building a RICO case. Federal racketeering charges. So it's not just white-collar crime anymore," Ethan said. "No," she replied. "It's criminal conspiracy on a national level." He looked at her. "And we started it." She smiled. "By accident." Later that evening, Ethan drove out to the docks. The place was empty, quiet except for seagulls and the low hum of cargo ships in the distance. He stood there, hands in his coat pockets, breathing the salt air. His phone buzzed. "Victoria." "Hey," she said. "Where are you?" "Clearing my head." She hesitated. "Mind if I join?" 15 minutes later, she was next to him, hair pulled back, rain misting on her jacket. They didn't speak for a while. Finally, he broke the silence. "I used to think I needed everything to be perfect. The image, the marriage, the business. But I was wrong." She glanced over. "Perfection's a lie. I know that now." She shifted, leaning her shoulder against his. "So what now?" she asked. He smiled slightly. "Now we rebuild. On our terms." She nodded. "And we protect the people who don't usually get protected." "I'm in," she said, and slipped her hand into his. Over the following weeks, the headlines exploded. Seattle CEO helps uncover national fraud ring. FBI arrests power brokers linked to Shaw's network. The janitor who saved a company, Who is Victoria Monroe? Ethan refused interviews. Victoria declined offers for book deals. They weren't doing it for that. They had other plans. Together, they launched a legal firm specializing in anti-corruption cases, offering counsel to whistleblowers, small business owners, and people who had nowhere else to turn. The firm grew fast, not because of marketing, but because of trust. People knew they'd been in the fire and walked out alive. One morning, over coffee, Victoria opened an envelope and pulled out a crayon drawing. It was Irina's. Her, Victoria, Ethan, and Vaughn, standing in front of a small building with a gold sign, Justice Office. In childish handwriting at the bottom, it said, "You saved the world." Victoria laughed softly, tears in her eyes. "She's not wrong," Ethan said, sipping his coffee. She looked up at him, and for the first time in a long time, her smile wasn't tired. "Neither are you." Summer passed into fall, but the aftermath of the scandal showed no signs of fading. Each day brought a new headline, a new leak, a new arrest. The network Alexander Shaw had built, with Madison Carter, Marcus Langston, and Nathaniel Reyes among its key players, had turned out to be just one head of a hydra. And the rest of the body was still out there. Ethan Carter sat in the boardroom of his company, now partially restructured and under federal observation. The government had frozen some assets, but not all. His name, thanks to the investigations, was cleared. The DOJ had officially recognized him as a cooperative witness. But Ethan didn't feel victorious. He felt exposed. "I don't like that we still don't know who Shaw was working for," he said to Vaughn, who sat across from him, looking like he hadn't slept in 2 days. "We're getting close," Vaughn said. "There's a man, Albert Stanton, big money guy, rarely appears in public, has offshore accounts in 6 countries. He funneled most of the capital behind Shaw's companies." "Let me guess," Ethan muttered. "He's untouchable. For now." Victoria walked in mid-conversation, holding a new file. "Until now." She dropped the folder on the table. "What is it?" Ethan asked. "Flight logs, private charters, meetings, bank transactions. Shaw, Langston, and Reyes all met with Stanton in the same week before the forged contract hit your desk." Ethan opened the folder. His eyes widened. This is enough. "Enough to shake the tree," Vaughn said. "Not enough for a warrant, but close." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "So we go deeper." Victoria raised her brow. "Deeper? You said it yourself," Ethan replied. "Shaw was just the beginning. If Stanton was behind this, I need to know how far he reached. And who else he's paying." Vaughn hesitated. "You sure you want to keep going down this road? You're not the same guy you were 6 months ago. You're already a target." "I'm not backing down now," Ethan said. "Not while they're still out there." Days turned into nights filled with research, surveillance, and closed-door meetings. Victoria worked like she was possessed, tapping into old law school contacts, building paper trails, calling in favors. Vaughn deployed his own people quietly, discreetly. Then came the breakthrough. One of Stanton's shell companies had made a massive payment to a lobbying group in Washington, D.C., one tied to a senator under investigation for ethics violations. Ethan stared at the report. "They're trying to influence legislation, probably to protect themselves." "They already have," Victoria said. "But now we know where they live." She handed him another document. "What's this?" "An invitation." She smiled. "Stanton is attending a private gala in New York tomorrow night." "A public appearance?" "Rare. But yes." "You're suggesting we go?" "I'm not just suggesting," Victoria said. "I already RSVP'd." Ethan smirked. "Of course you did." The next night they were in Manhattan. The gala was held at the Westwood Tower, 45th floor. Crystals, champagne, and tuxedos. Everyone smiled through polished teeth. Behind every handshake was a deal, and behind every deal, a secret. Ethan wore a tailored black suit. Victoria stunned in a deep navy dress, her hair pulled into a sleek knot. She moved through the room like she belonged there because she did. They spotted Stanton almost immediately. Tall, silver-haired, a measured, rehearsed laugh. He stood with a senator, a Wall Street CEO, and an actor Ethan vaguely recognized from a streaming series. He looked ordinary, like a man who'd never be questioned. Victoria leaned toward Ethan and whispered, "He's more careful than Shaw, but not untouchable." They waited, watched. Finally, she made her move. She approached Stanton with her glass of wine, smile cool and confident. "Mr. Stanton?" He turned, polite but guarded. "Yes. I represent a client with questions about your charitable foundation." That was all it took. He flinched barely, but it was there. Ethan saw it across the room and knew. She'd struck a nerve. Stanton's expression hardened. "I'm afraid you're mistaken." "I'm afraid I'm not," Victoria replied softly. A silence. Quiet pause. Then he smiled, all teeth. "Enjoy your evening, Ms. Monroe," she said. "Of course." He walked away, fast. Victoria returned to Ethan. "He knows," she said. "And he's scared." Ethan looked out over the glittering city skyline. "Then it's working." The weeks that followed moved like a current under the surface of calm water. Ethan Carter kept running his business like nothing had changed, outwardly. But inside, every moment was a strategy. Every handshake weighed against motive. Every email copied to Victoria Monroe and Detective Vaughn. Albert Stanton didn't disappear. He didn't need to. He was too powerful, too smart, but now he was under the light. Every transaction, every business tie, every foreign wire transfer. They traced it all. And then, finally, the wiretap broke the case open. A call between Stanton and a state official. Clear. Unfiltered. Discussing payouts. Case manipulation. Intimidation. Even names of judges. It was enough. The Department of Justice acted within days. The arrests were swift and quiet, like plucking weeds before dawn. Albert Stanton, Senator Darrell Kessler, 2 executives at Langston Global, 5 lawyers, 3 bankers, and then, finally, Madison Carter. Ethan stood outside the courthouse in downtown Seattle, the cold wind tugging at his coat. Victoria was beside him, calm as always, though her eyes didn't miss a thing. Inside, the trial was already underway. Shaw, Reyes, Langston all testified under pressure. The evidence was undeniable. When Madison was called, Ethan watched from the back. She walked in with perfect posture, hair styled, makeup flawless. But the eyes were different now. Harder, hollow. She didn't look at him. She never said a word about their marriage. Just answered the prosecution's questions with short, rehearsed lines. When they brought up the forged contract, she hesitated. 1 second, that's all. Then she spoke. "It was Alexander's idea, but I didn't stop him. I wanted what it offered. And that was that." On the final day, the judge addressed the courtroom. In light of the evidence presented, and the gravity of these coordinated acts of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice, the court finds the following individuals guilty. He read the names. Madison Carter, 10 years in federal prison. Marcus Langston, 12 years. Nathaniel Reyes, 7 years. Alexander Shaw, 15 years without parole. Albert Stanton, 20 years with immediate asset seizure. Others followed. It was done. Ethan exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. But Ethan didn't stop. He took Victoria's hand and kept walking. Later, they stood by Lake Washington, away from it all. "She's gone," Victoria said. "So are they all." He nodded. "You okay?" "No," he admitted. "But I will be." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We never asked for this," she said softly. "No. But maybe we were the only ones who could finish it." She smiled. "Where do we go from here?" He looked at her. "Anywhere." Months passed. Life settled, somewhat. Victoria returned to practicing law full-time. Irina started at a new school. Happier, brighter. Vaughn received a commendation from the bureau but turned it down quietly, as expected. And Ethan? He built something new. With Victoria by his side, he launched the Monroe Carter Foundation. a nonprofit dedicated to corporate transparency, whistleblower protection, and small business legal defense. The offices were modest, the staff young and ambitious, but the mission was real. One afternoon, Irina stopped by after school. She looked at the sign on the wall, the logo they'd designed together. She tugged on Victoria's coat. "Are we safe now?" Victoria smiled and looked at Ethan. "Yes, baby. We are." And for the first time in a long, long time, it wasn't just something they said. It was something they believed. If you liked the story, give it a like, subscribe and share in the comments.